Welcome back, or welcome to Grateful and Full of Greatness. I'm your host, Mark Glicini. On this podcast, I sit down with guests who, in my opinion, live their lives with the pursuit of greatness in mind. And this platform allows me to discuss and to explain strategies that go into reaching peak performance. This is episode number 15. My guests are Dr. Catherine Logan and Mike Giunta. Dr. Logan is a sports medicine, orthopedic surgeon, writer, and so much more. She is the head league physician for the Premier Lacrosse League I currently play in, where I've been lucky enough to meet and to get to know her and Mike. Dr. Logan travels internationally and nationally as a member of the team physician pool for United States ski and snowboard teams each year. She's an attending at Rose Medical Center based in Denver, Colorado, where she lives with her family. I can't wait to hear her share her story and her journey. Mike Giunta is the owner and CEO of Evolution Physical Therapy, the medical director for the Premier Lacrosse League, head physical therapist for Burton Snowboards, and like Dr. Logan, a dear friend. He too works with elite athletes and performers across various sports from the Northeast to Southern California. It's been said that a painter paints with their hand, an artist paints with their hand and their mind, a master paints with their hand and their mind through their heart. I'm grateful to have these two talented and energizing masters here with me today. Dr. Logan and Mike, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
So every player in the Premier Lacrosse League, including me, speaks so highly of you guys. Your empathy, attention to detail, and unconditional care truly stand out. Could you elaborate on why you decided to get involved with the PLL and what it's been like over the past 2 years from your perspective? Dr. Logan, why don't we start with you?
So Mike is the one who actually brought me into the league, so he can give a little bit more about the history on how he got involved and how he brought me in, but I can tell you a little bit about Mike and me, and as far as our relationship and why we sort of came together in this endeavor. So I first was involved in US Ski Snowboarding. Part of that was covering the US Burton Open, which occurs in Valley each year. So I would basically be a physician at the bottom of the half pipe or slopestyle or those sort of events, just dealing with any traumas that came my way. And Mike was also in the medical tent. So as you indicated, he's the head physical therapist for the Burton Open. So since I was a physical therapist for 7 years, I think Mike and I immediately connected when we met those years ago. So we have a very similar mentality in that there's this whole continuum of care. And you can't just be surgeon and silo over here and physical therapist and silo over there. So immediately I think we sort of had that bit of a kinship and kept in touch, like even though we didn't really need to after the Burton Open, and just sort of enjoyed the whole concept of like sharing ideas, even if we didn't know that they were going to go anywhere. So I'll let Mike kind of talk about, how we were brought into the PLL. But I would say, for both of us, we just have a shared mentality of, the level of care that you guys deserve, and that it's not just about sort of triaging an injury on site, but trying to look at the bigger picture and how we can sort of keep you guys healthy throughout the year, and also look at things like mental health and diet, nutrition, anything else, even if it falls without or outside our expertise, like how can we get it to you? So Mike, I'll lead into you.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I always love hearing that background of how we met a bunch of years ago, and kind of how it's evolved, not only into a professional relationship, but, a huge friendship, and, everything that kind of goes along with that, I think is super cool. And, I would say that the way that I got involved with the league is really just from perseverance and loving, the sport of lacrosse, loving people, and just having a genuine mentality that athletes should be treated with the best foot forward. So I volunteered many years ago in a different professional lacrosse tour-based league called the LXM Pro Tour, and was fortunate enough to meet some people that I idolized growing up in the sport of lacrosse, and just kept in touch with those people over the years. And when the Premier Lacrosse League came to be, I reached out to those people with the idea of creating a medical team that focused first on athlete care and just proper treatment and of athletes. And when I started to kind of dive down that path with the leadership crew of the PLL, it, you know, became apparent that we just needed to bring in other people with that same mentality that we knew would just always have the athletes' best intentions in mind and be very front facing to them, not hiding behind closed doors or waiting for things to come to them, but, you know, being very proactive about their care and about their health. And I think that we were, you know, obviously Dr. Logan and I together have been able to build a medical team that does exactly that. And, you know, we're going to keep on going with it and keep on improving it. But with the support of the league and the players, we really feel like we can build a medical team that's second to none.
Yeah, and I think you guys both touched upon the fact that you guys are both out for the level of care to the athletes, and it's felt, it's apparent, it's prevalent, especially what we just went through, the 3-week championship series in Salt Lake. And Dr. Logan, do you mind sharing a little bit more of the time and the medical protocols that went into it? Because it was so extensive and you put so much effort to pull off such a successful bubble.
Yeah, of course. So basically, when all this started to happen, you know, as far as on a national level, the league said, hey, can we have a meeting and try and figure out what, you know, how we can do this? And nobody really had any information yet. And as you know, everything with COVID is evolving on a weekly basis. So my first suggestion was like, we need a committee with different experts. So my background obviously is as an orthopedic surgeon. I'm certainly not an infectious disease expert, but I understand the league really well. I understand what, you know, you guys need to be safe, but also, you know, we needed people in infectious disease, internal medicine to really like bring them to the table. So we formed a committee. Basically, it was myself leading it. And then we had an infectious disease expert, Dr. Sandra Nelson from Mass General. I pulled in Dr. David Coopersmith, who's from the Stedman Clinic, because he also does a similar role with US Ski and Snowboard. And then finally, Dr. Jennifer Nepper, who you may have met during physicals. So she is urgent care, internal medicine. So we were on the committee along with a couple of the executives from the PLL, and we basically for 18 weeks, every Friday night, we had a really long meeting, just like, you know, we're doing right now, you know, over Zoom. And we basically, it was like a, you know, sort of a decision, like heavy, fast-paced meeting every Friday night. And then in the week interim, everybody had their tasks. So we knew what decisions we needed to make that following Friday, whether it was like, okay, choose the venue, or we need to make a decision about how long they're going to quarantine. And we had a week to meet about it in either subgroup or research or whatever it was. And then Friday night was just making decisions. So we did that, you know, for months. And it was, you know, what I'd said to Rob Sanzillo, our lead counsel, like it is an extremely stressful sort of thing to try to feel like you have that responsibility to make sure that I'm providing something that is safe and also successful for the league, that they can bring the sport back. But at the same time, like I also told him, like every physician is like a true like nerd, and like when you are given like a problem, like you want to like figure it out. So like it was like an extremely like rewarding mental exercise to go through. And what I've said to a lot of people, I think the reason we had success is because we were extremely prepared. Like we went through every scenario that you could think of, like, okay, what, you know, and I'm sure you saw me running people down. What if a delivery guy comes in without a mask? Like, what do we need to do? What if someone tries to sneak out of the bubble? What if like someone tries to order food from a non-approved vendor? So I think it's just like anything. It was extremely like stressful to do all that planning, but because we did that planning, like that's why it worked.
And to button it up, is there anything that in regards to the protocols, because it was so extensive and it was amazing, it was very successful, is there anything that you wish you would have done differently in regards to the protocol, or was it 100% perfect?
I would say the only thing like I wished we could have done, and it's like so minor, is like to bring in little things like our own bus drivers, like actually have them like live in the bubble with us, like the people who are giving us dining, have them live in the bubble with us. Those are sort of the things that would like keep me up at night. Like Mike knows, like the whole time we're in the bubble, I would have these sort of like dreams where I'd like wake up and I just had this like dream about how the bus driver doesn't have a mask on, nobody feels comfortable speaking up, all these sort of things. So I think at the end of the day, no bubble is perfect. We had holes in our bubble just because you have a bus driver, you have people working at the stadium. And so you're always sort of looking over your shoulder thinking, are we protected from those people? Because you can't trust them. And that was what I was always sort of trying to impress on you guys, even though we got through many rounds of testing and you guys were all negative, there are still people within our radius that we don't, we can't trust to the same extent.
I love it. I have a mentor who's at Princeton right now, and he's working with a team on catastrophic risk. So when this hit in March, it was really a deep conversation on the low probability of something that really bad could happen. And what you're talking about, it makes me think of like a sci-fi movie. If one of these bus drivers gets everything, it could just ruin everything, right? And the level of preparation was definitely felt. And I want to turn it over to Mike and the fact that I was quite frankly hesitant about playing so many games in such a short amount of time, right? I felt the toll, and right when the practice or the game was over, it was right back to recovery. So what was it like for you, Mike, treating athletes 5 to 7 games each over the course of 20 games, extreme heat, high altitude, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it goes into the same concept of being prepared and preparing yourself what you feel like is going to come. So we created an 8-week injury prevention and strength and conditioning program with the help of a strength coach that we know in Denver named Patrick Nolan, who is excellent, and delivered that program with the pretense that we know that muscle strains are going to be something that could be very prevalent during this tournament with that increase in load. So we try to prepare as much as we could leading up to the season and really just constantly be sending information to the athletes about what they're going to incur. We felt like this was something that, none of these athletes have ever experienced before. The closest thing would have been the World Games with USA, but even with that, the intensity level was just not there as it was with this. So we knew that we had to elevate everything that we were doing. And so, once we got there, we had that mentality going in, and then we just, like always, kind of worked as much as we could around the clock to make sure that guys were feeling good, and we were trying to head things off. I think the bubble scenario compared to the regular season, where we were just seeing athletes one week at a time, actually afforded us the ability to do some rehab because we just had access to everybody consistently. So instead of just always making somebody feel better just because we wanted them to play, we could also institute, more of a plan over the course of that time to ensure that they were doing everything that they could to also help keep them healthy. Hydration was a huge part of that. It's something that we knew leading in. We tried to develop a plan beforehand to ensure the guys knew, what level of hydration that they needed. And I think, some of the Premier Lacrosse League sponsors in Gatorade and, that kind of stuff did a great job just with providing product and stuff that we could make sure the guys were getting. And then we had water bottles all over the place and, that kind of stuff. So, that consistency, I think really just kind of helped prolong people's livelihoods throughout the course of the time.
I love it. I'm writing them down right as you guys are answering these questions. And what keeps coming up is this word mentality, right? And there's really no talent that goes into having a mentality of remaining consistent, of being prepared and being overly prepared for anything, right? Whether it's the protocol 18 weeks that you talked about, Dr. Logan, or the 8-week injury prevention leading up, it's all this preparation. And I just love that it's intangible and anybody can have that. And it really made the difference. And it was why it was so successful. And
Mark, I think, going off of that, I think with all these different groups of people who are just, in my opinion, at the highest level of what they're able to do, we're all out there trying to match each other's intensity levels, right? And match each other's preparation and match each other's mentality. And I learned that a lot from the athletes when I see how dialed in the athletes are to their craft and what they're doing. And then I look at Dr. Logan with what she's doing with the COVID committee, and then, how she's relating that to the rest of it. We're just all constantly trying to match where that is. And it elevates all of us into an even higher level, which is exciting.
It's so awesome. In past episodes, I've had a bunch of successful coaches on here. And one of the threads that we pulled on was the fact that the preparation that goes into the details of a practice or a protocol here and there, they might not be necessary for that specific moment, but being prepared all on the way throughout your life or your career sets you up for that big moment where there's an opportunity or an obstacle or a high pressure situation to just tackle it immediately. And nobody does it better in the PLL bubble than you guys did. Recovery and mobility and what athletes in the past would have called seemingly ancillary protocols are finally being recognized as important. Over the past 2 seasons, the PLL has partnered with brands like Garmin and Gatorade, Hyperice, and Whoop, all with the player's best interest in mind. Do you guys mind elaborating on how essential recovery is in your opinion? I know we touched upon it and the fact that there's so many games in such a short period of time, but how essential is recovery to you guys? And are there specific strategies or protocols you tend to suggest to your patients and clients?
So I think for me, the way I can express like how important I think it is so we're building a new clinic space for me in Denver right now that'll open in October, and we're putting in a whole recovery clinic. So for an orthopedic surgeon to put in a recovery clinic, that's like, I literally don't know of one that has one. And it's because like I really understand that this is so important. And it's like, I want people to sort of come into my clinic, and what I'm always trying to express to them is kind of like what Mike and I do together, is that there's this whole continuum of care. It's not just like I operate and you're good, like that is just like when your work begins. And part of that work and that rehabilitation is the recovery. And it's not, the mentality, that was happening 20 years ago, of like, oh, you just, you keep working harder. I think in science now, we know how much more important, like even like the simple act of sleep is, and how that affects our overall health and the percentage of time we're doing that in our whole life. And really how important that is, not only for our musculoskeletal health, but for our cardiovascular and our neurological health. So I think for me in the orthopedic world, it's not totally there yet. But I would, I know it should be. So, for me, like when I operate on someone, I operate on Tuesdays and Thursdays. On Fridays, I make all my post-operative patients come in, and it's really to sort of like wrap their head around like, all right, you're doing your like rehab now, and we have close communication with the therapist. We're setting up this new room so that they can do things like the Normatec. They can, work with all the Hyperice stuff. They can do dry needling. They can do cupping, and that's all. Mike is helping me partner with physical therapists to do that. So for me, it's huge, and it's part of the recovery, whether you're just like kind of in a conditioning kind of preparation phase, or you're actually in like a post-operative phase.
I have a uncle who's an orthopedic surgeon as well, and what he talks about is very blunt sometimes. It can come off almost as not being empathetic, right? Whether the patient's not ready for surgery yet because they have to lose an X amount of weight, and it can come across as insensitive, right? But it really, because he wants the surgery to go the right way, and then the back half that you were talking about to go excellent as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think information is power, right? And I think when we're wrapping our heads around the idea of recovery, the more information that we have as providers, or the more information that we have as athletes, we can become more powerful in our craft. And so for me, using things like the whoop and, that kind of stuff to kind of understand where we are on that continuum from a scientific standpoint, I think is important. I think giving athletes more information as far as, how their bodies recover, what is optimal recovery, what does all that mean? I think the more we're able to educate, it will help us, just help those athletes kind of wrap their head around why we're doing some of this stuff, and then how it will help them. And that kind of stuff just becomes more powerful as, you get that consistency behind it. So, those are all the type of ancillary things that I think Dr. Logan and I are trying to add into this world. And we feel like if, we're not telling people to do that, then who is, right? Like if the orthopedic surgeon is not telling somebody that they need to lose weight, or the physical therapist is not telling people that they need to lose weight, well, who is, right? Like who does that fall to, until it falls to nobody, and then it doesn't get said. So I think ultimately in the course of recovery and in what we just went through with the championship series, it really came down to relative recovery, right? Like you were never fully recovering, but we were trying to allow you to recover enough and, have conversations with coaches about, what certain guys could do in practices and that sort of thing to make sure that we were going to be able to put the best product on the field come game time.
I love it. Perfect answer. And something that you guys touched upon much earlier that I wanted to come back to was kind of the shared mentality, the perseverance, the intangibles that went into making the team that you guys developed for the Premier Lacrosse League. And I don't know if you've seen this 3-circle Venn diagram of the sweet spot of a profession, but it's the demand, the skill, and the passion. And we touched upon the growing and increased demand and attention to health and wellness, the recovery side, the hydration side, the introduction included your highlights in terms of your skill set, so we can go deeper in that later on. But can you guys talk a little bit more about your passion for what you guys do? Where did it come from, the influences in your life, and perhaps what got you into it in the first place?
Mike, why don't you start?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can go after that. So my passion really just came from my interest level in athletics, interest level in the human body and all the things that it's able to do. I think I have an inherent passion in being able to help people, and realized very early on that sharing my knowledge then helps even more people. I think for me, I'm not naive to the fact that I can only affect, with my 2 hands, I can only affect a certain number of people a day, but with my mind and my reach and everything like that, I can kind of scale that to helping more and more people, the more people that we can educate on these processes. So when I think about just my profession as physical therapy, I'm trying to redefine this profession, and I'm trying to show people that there is a way to do this. If you constantly educate and you do things the right way, you can just get a lot farther and you can help more people. And so, particularly with the PLL and the way that the structure is with kind of like that, the office staff and, their ability to trust us, I think we're really able to pursue those passions, and we're really able to, try things with the athletes that we know will work. And there's that level of buy-in. And to me, there's nothing more gratifying than to, institute systems, institute programs or whatever it might be, and see it working and see the response that we get from the athletes. And even just this, small task of Mark, you asking us to come on that podcast, I think that's validating, right? For me in particular, that you find value in what I'm doing enough to, bring me to your audience in order to talk about it. So I just love all of those aspects of what we do.
I wrote down scale your reach. That's not a term I've ever heard before, but I loved it. And when I was talking to my close family and friends as to why I'm having you both on here, that's the reason, right? Because you guys have put your hands on me, been there, been empathetic, and carried me through injury and otherwise. And that's the exact reason. So you guys can scale your reach in terms of touching other people with your words and what you do so well.
Thank you. So I think for me, I wasn't one of these people that grew up thinking like I want to be a doctor or a physician. I didn't grow up in a kind of family that sort of put that forward. For me, I didn't go to medical school till I was 30. As you know, I was a physical therapist for 7 years. So I was on this totally different path. I was married before I went to medical school. So our house, like growing up, like all that, the only value that was really sort of put down to like very consistently was that you should have some sort of life of service. And, my parents were both professionals, but they both volunteered a lot. And that was really like the only thing that I would feel like, all right, you're going to disappoint your parents or not like sort of feel like they really did well by you if you're not doing something that they feel like gives back to your community. And that's just like basics. You can, there's a million jobs you can do to do that. So that was really the only thing that was kind of like on the table for a long time. And then I think for me, the thing I identified is I really liked having like a physical skill. And that is both as a physical therapist and as a surgeon, like that you're actually, just kind of like athletics, you sort of continue to get your reps in and you continue to work on something. And ultimately that's why I sort of transitioned. I always liked musculoskeletal health. I liked medicine a lot. And as I was exposed to surgeons more, I realized like this whole like 10,000 hours and getting your reps in and like getting good at some sort of task, I felt like extremely fulfilling. And then it also sort of completed that service goal as well, that you can do things that are like, you know, obviously like you're making money and bringing in revenue, you know, as a surgeon, but then you can also like give your skills in different ways and volunteer your time, whether it's like through education or working with different communities or flying overseas or whatever it might be. Like for me, it just hit like all those big check marks that you feel like you can find a really rewarding career that can change over time, because professional athletes are awesome to work with, but so is like, you know, going down to like an underserved high school. So like, I think it just gives you that variability. And I think the selfish side is like just having a skill that you can work on. Like when we were in fellowship, we had like full access to a cadaver lab that you basically could just say at any time. And I'm sorry if this is like gross, but you could say, hey, I want to practice, you know, ACL surgery or, you know, whatever it might be. And they would just pull out a cadaver for you and you could, and put out all the equipment. And for me, it was like, it's just like, it was like going to practice. Like I put on headphones, I went into the lab and I would practice, you know, and that whole idea of like keeping up a physical skill, I think is really good just for my overall like mental growth and well-being and just feeling like you're constantly like reaching new goals. And that's the selfish side. And then I think it just, like I said, hits those buckets of like just feeling, you know, that you can be a part of your community and be involved in your community and give back and like get that reward as well.
Love it. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys much later on, but we're all over right now, is kind of where that empathy comes from, right? Because as an athlete going through, I've had surgeries before. I've seen doctors for my shoulder and my back and all this different stuff. And they have different levels of empathy. It's just a fact, right? In what you come across. And you guys are very, very high in empathy, right? And on top of that, you have a high level of like insightfulness and curiosity. I mean, just hearing that you didn't start medical school until you're 30 and you have this kind of this aura in your family for life of service. And I know Mike, it's like I could reach out to the guy at any point and he's willing to hop on Zoom and do mobility. So it's just kind of this dire want to just help others and always be available. I mean, availability is so huge. And I just want you to preach to the audience in some way. And I think by me asking this question, it'll come out. Where does that empathy and coachability come from? Is it something that you actively work on? I know, Mike, you said that it comes kind of inherent is the word that you use when it came to wanting to do what you do in terms of working with athletics and getting into physical therapy. But where would you say that empathy and coachability comes from, or that student mentality?
Sure. I think some of it is inherent for sure. I mean, that's why we were called to this life of helping or service or, you know, whatever you may call it. But, you know, I also look at it as a skill too, in a way, where, you know, you can sharpen it and you can get better at it. And I think for me, it was just never accepting that the norm was okay in a lot of different ways, and seeing that the way things were done and the way that certain things were accepted, and that just became okay. And I would always look at my wife who went through culinary school, and she became a chef, and she would come home and say, you know, the chef acted a certain way or yelled or was mean. And I just kind of was, you know, why is this happening? Why is that okay that everybody in that world just accepts it? And I've seen it in my world too. And I've seen different, you know, physical therapists or athletic training or whatever it may be. They just accepted that it was the norm because it was like that for so many years. And this is just how we did it. And so I think that's how my empathy became sharpened, because I always just had that sense that I wanted to sharpen the skill of being able to help people and have them know that I was there for them. And the more athletes that I talked to, it was becoming very apparent that was one of the main things that they wanted, right? They just wanted somebody to be there. They wanted to know that I could call this person and they would give me advice or, you know, whatever it might be, but they maybe didn't feel like they had it. And, certainly there's tons of people out there that do that, but maybe just not as a system, right? That we weren't seeing the consistency of that happening. And I felt like, there was a way to improve on that. And that's really ultimately what we want to do.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. Like, I think a lot of it is obviously inherent, but I do think it is very learned, and it can be learned from different aspects of your life, whether it's like from a teacher or for your family and I know it's something, my husband and I talk about all the time for, raising kids, and, you have two professional parents who really, what are they going to want for? Not very much, and so, we're always sort of tasked with trying to figure out how do we, make sure our kids kind of enter this world with like some sort of empathic lens. And like, so I do some of the same things that my parents did, which is, make sure that we're volunteering a lot, make sure that we are, getting out into our community and seeing different people who maybe are having a different experience from us, talking about those things at the dinner table. We regularly like go and serve food, and, my kids are 4 and 7, and, and I don't sort of, hide that from them, that maybe that guy over there that we're giving food to, maybe he's drunk right now, or maybe, and sort of just like kind of giving him a talk and sort of explaining what the different situations are for people in the world. And I think that's really, because I can't say that they're empathetic, at birth, but I think that's something that, depending on the environment that you're raised in, or, you're brought into through your coaches or your teachers or whatever, those are a lot of examples of how that can be taught to you.
I love that. It is a story my mentor, Dr. Gilbert, always uses about the power of observation. These two twins grow up with an alcoholic father, and one of them is asked years down the road, why did you turn into an alcoholic yourself? And his response was, well, I watched my father. And the other twin, who hadn't had a drop of alcohol throughout his entire life, when asked later on in his life, why did you not have a drop of alcohol? He says, because I watched my father. And it's just really interesting how there's two lessons that can come from that. Just earlier today, I was watching a TED Talk by Drew Dudley about everyday leadership, and how for some reason, human beings believe that leadership is something that they have to aspire to in the future, and they can't do right now. It can't be celebrated. That little thing that you talked about in your story there, and going and helping somebody else, even if they might be drunk, that little everyday leadership, it's not beyond us to do something like that. And I think that our society says this is leadership and this isn't, even though they both are. So I love you guys both sharing those stories. They're just so awesome. A very common attribute among peak performers, at least that I study, is the getaway to positive outlets that allow them to perform optimally in their given endeavors. Do either of you have hobbies or routines outside of work that keep you mentally sharp, recharged, or revitalized as you go through your week or weekend? Mike, do you want to start that one?
You want me to start? You can hear me, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think, for me, one of the main things is family, and then being to have that kind of home life to really just always fall back on and know that they're there. I think I'm fortunate where, I have very supportive parents and family around me. I have a very supportive wife that is supportive in me going and pursuing these passions and, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's huge for me, because if I didn't have that, I'm not sure that I would be able to, do all the things that we're doing. And, a lot of people always ask me, what's my favorite sport? And I played lacrosse growing up, and, played a bunch of sports, but I will always say that snowboarding is my favorite, because I think that there's a sense of, when you're in nature on the mountain and you're just kind of free riding, listening to music and that kind of stuff, there's typically not a time where I feel just, I feel myself, I guess, like if that kind of makes sense. And so I always point to that as my favorite thing to do and activity to do. And, I don't get to do it often, but I think that almost makes it more special. that when I do it, I get those sensations and those feelings.
Something that I haven't done much of in my life, but I did the day after we lost the championship game, was Bikram yoga. And the reason why I did it is because it's 105 degrees and I can't be anywhere else. And that's what came to mind while I was thinking about you being on the mountain listening to music. If I'm not here right now, I'm going to pass out type of thing. I think that's important. That's why I asked the question, is because everybody has them. And even though you're doing these great things in your craft, and you both do, there's these things that need to keep you on even keel, and everybody has their own.
Yeah, I agree. Like both Mike and I think employ exercise to, just like many of us, to sort of work through some things. That was part of the reason why I settled in Colorado. Like, I think I found so much peace out here, whether, you're snowboarding or you're hiking or you're doing a trail run, it's very easy out here to just clear your head. And like when we were doing these COVID committees, like there was a lot of times I was working through hard concepts and how do I fix this? And, I would just get out and do a trail run, and it's like amazing how quickly things become clearer. So I think it's almost like an active meditation, like I think there's just nothing around you. You're not at a gym. You're not looking at, the numbers on the treadmill. You're not looking at the people around you or people being loud around you. You're just sort of out, and it's very, very easy to take yourself out of reality.
Yeah, I was listening to a mastery session by a guy named Robin Sharma, and he talks about 4 ways to improve or grow self-love. The first being honor your special, do whatever you need to do to clear your head. The second being do something difficult daily. One of the fourth and final being help others. But the one that we're touching upon that he talked about, which was really interesting to me, was go to the woods, right? There's all this outside, always in your face, whether it's answering a text message or an email or running off to another meeting, and sometimes it's very, very important to just go to the woods where you're with your breath and being mindful.
I think one thing that just, unfortunately is just undervalued is that think time, and going for a run, doing all these things that Dr. Logan just suggested. You clear your head, or oftentimes you think about things and you work through them, right? And I try to do that in business. I try to do that in my profession, is just setting aside that time to think. And I'm not really one that I use things for what they are, so to speak, right? So like I do that in physical therapy, where I preach this to the other physical therapists that I work with, is, make sure you're focusing on what the exercise is intended to, right? Like if the exercise is intended for strength, maybe you need to correct for balance, right? Because if they're falling all over the place, then you're not getting the strength component of it. Or if you're focusing on balance, but they don't have the strength, then, don't try to combine those two things together. And so oftentimes when I go for a run, I go for the purpose of thinking or clearing my head in that specific. If I'm working out with somebody else, I'm not going into that workout wanting to think or clear my head. I'm going into it with a more social aspect. So therefore I get out of it what I want to get out of it. And I think that I just try to kind of pair those things together and make sure that, I'm doing things with intent rather than just doing them just to do them.
My first mental coach at Yale, one of the first lessons he ever said to me is things happen by intention, not by accident, right? And that repeats in my mind forever. And sometimes what you were talking about there is your intention has to be to do nothing, right? To get lost, whether it's in the woods.
Totally fine.
So I love that. And something that stuck with me as I was getting ready for this podcast is, Mike, you mentioned how important it is to you to work with clients who are motivated to get better. Can you explain why that desire to improve through physical therapy with you is such a key element?
Yeah, it's way easier to work with somebody who just is going to put into it as much as you're putting into it. That being said, it's just not always the case. And I think it's definitely another skill that you have to hone over your career to, it's probably more of a coaching mindset that you need to get better at, right? Because you're trying to pull the best out of that person. You're trying to get out of them more, get more out of them than sometimes they are willing to want to give, and oftentimes you have to meet them where they are and then take it from there, right? See, kind of what they're willing to give you and adjust their program accordingly. And then try to
make small little goals or small little gains throughout that process in order to get what you want. I always talk about this, especially with our younger physical therapy crew, but, oftentimes people come in telling you how they want to get treated or telling you what they want, right? And I'm sure that's the same thing as an athlete, right? The athlete comes in and say, this is how I want to play, or this is how I want to do it. And sometimes you have to give a little bit to get a lot back, right? And so I think it's totally okay to do some of those things in a strategic way to appease that person, while then instituting the mindset and the things that you really want to do that will work and accomplish. And I think that's just kind of a human interaction thing more than anything else, but it works.
Yeah. Brenna Brown, the lead authority on vulnerability, she wrote Dare Greatly, and she was talking with Michael Gervais on this podcast, and she was talking about how she's an extreme introvert and she's traveling all around the country and she's doing these speeches in front of hundreds to thousands of people, and that's an introvert's nightmare. So when she comes home and she's got to get ready to take care of the kids because he's been taking care of her while she's been on the road, she's just depleted at that point. All she wants to do is recharge. And something that she was talking about that really stuck with me is this percentage thing that happened between relationships. So she has this thing with her husband where she comes home and she'll be like, I'm 20%. And he's like, don't worry, babe, I'm 80 today then, So I love that. Right. But it came to mind, and that's how it should be with your patient. Right? You have to have that kind of give and take that you were talking about, not even if it's just a romantic relationship, but client to you, right? And I think it's so interesting how that kind of gets lost. Dr. Logan, turning it over to you, you've seen and experienced so much within your journey in orthopedics. What are some ever-present qualities you've come across with high-level patients and athletes and performers that you've worked with besides this improvement to get better?
Yeah, that's obviously I think the easiest thing to loop into is, if you remember when we were doing the town hall, and we were talking about basically my job was trying to figure out, how am I going to get your buy-in to behave and really just make sure our protocol is followed through and that we all, kind of engage in these guidelines. So what I pulled from that was the common thread that I see in anybody who is a skilled and advanced and, athlete, or anybody who's really, even like a CEO, you've reached a certain amount of success, and the common thread to get there is, the two things that make you successful from my perspective is that you obviously have discipline. So the first thing I said to you guys was you need to engage your discipline, and the second thing I said to you guys is then you're going to start to get bored, quarantine stinks, and then you have to avoid complacency. And so that's really where I see the difference in people who are successful, whether it's in their career or their athletics, is they can do those two things well. Because everybody can be disciplined for a short period of time, just like people on a diet or whatever, a program, and then it gets a little boring, it gets a little stale. And it's the people who can avoid the complacency of it all and re-engage over and over again. Look at wake up every morning and sort of say, yep, I got to do this again, and I have to come at it with the same sort of fire. That was how I addressed you, because that's the common thread. And I knew that if I could get that into your heads, that you would take it as a personal mission to address, the protocol yourself and engage in all of those things I was asking you to do.
It's funny, after that town hall, in which it was very serious, right? There was obviously an aura about it. And I know you on a deeper level as a friend, right? And when I saw you being intense like that, I was like, okay, it's time to get disciplined. It's time to not get complacent, but you need that kind of serious yet funny aspect of you. If you were always like that, people would just rebel and go off the beaten path. But you can tell that based on our empathy conversation before, how if you're able to go from empathy to that seriousness, I was shocked with discipline right there. I was ready to stay indoors and then not go see anyone. That's for sure.
Fired me up too. I was fired up leaving that thing. I was like, let's go. I'm ready to run through a wall right now, but stay inside. But definitely stay inside.
Run into a wall to another room, not outside.
Yes, exactly. Not outside.
So staying on that discipline on a broader scale, for both of you, we talked about the outlets that you guys have, but are there any resources or sources of inspiration that you guys all refer back to Dr. Logan if it's for you and your kids, Mike, if it's with you and your significant other? Do you guys always are talking about these resources or things that you always go back to stay motivated, not get complacent, and stay disciplined?
Mike, go ahead.
Sure. So, for me, I have found a lot of value in engaging different people from different professions that are unrelated. I think I learn a lot from that. I'm not sure if it was the first time I heard of that concept, but I know it's something that Kobe Bryant used to do, where he would, basically find the greatest person in their profession and talk to them about what made them great in that profession and, all the little intangible things that they do to kind of get ahead. And so I try to do that with many different professions and just take out different little tidbits of what I learned from those and do it. And then I think just having those really steady relationships at home has been, my rock, basically, like something that I always know that I can draw on. And I do think family is extremely important and something that should never be undervalued in any way. And so I think when I find myself drifting in that direction, I try to make sure that or drifting away in that direction, I make sure that I do my self-check to, get re-engaged and, spend that quality time, because there's really nothing more important than that.
Absolutely. My God, I love the whole family coming back to the Rock. I love it.
I think for me, like, as far as, because what you're really asking is like, how do we sort of maintain our own discipline? Is that sort of what you're, so for me, I think I'm always thinking a little bit more about the past, and, just mentors I've had and going through different stages. And so going back to medical school when you're 30 and then, going into, orthopedics. So orthopedics is about like 5% women. You definitely have your moments where you're sort of either cast aside or, not given the same respect or not given the same opportunities, those sort of things. So for me, like, it's always kind of looking back and, thinking about, okay, how was it 5 years ago? What did I have to get through, at that time? Or like, we talked about like the marathon bombing and like being pregnant. And I always sort of like think back to those sort of times and think, okay, like, well, if you did that, you're going to be fine. You can get through this. And I think my husband, so I've been with my husband since 1999. So when, we got together, I was just working at a bar, in graduate school. And then I was in physical therapy school. And then, we went through all these transitions together. So I think kind of how Mike is saying, you have this sort of stable foundation who can, always remind you of like the different challenges you've already overcome, and the lessons learned from those sort of things. And the same thing from like, different mentors I've had along the way. You just have to like understand who your circle is. And this is something I talked to, I don't think he'd mind me saying this, but I think I talked to Ty Warner about this while we were in the bubble. He wants to go into orthopedic surgery. It's an even smaller percentage to find a Black orthopedic surgeon or, minority in general. And, what I sort of said to him was like, you have to find your circle. Like, so, challenges are going to come your way and you have to figure out, who you can speak to about those things, even if it's purely just to complain and kind of get your rant out. That person might not know all the answers or know what you should do next. But, you have to have your people who you can go and talk to and make sure like they kind of give you that good reset. So I think more than a specific resource, I feel like it's like you have to have your people.
I love it. Easiest way to enhance your life is to enhance your inner circle. And I love that. The story that comes to mind is there's a woman's national soccer player. Her name is Kelly O'Hara. And years ago, she was talking about this story, and it was just such a powerful story. She gets cut from the team and then get called up because one of the other ladies got hurt. So she gets brought on, and the coach lets her know, you're only going to be a cheerleader. You're going to come to the World Games, but you're only going to be a cheerleader. A couple of games in, they're down 2-0 to Sweden. And the strength and conditioning coach goes, Kelly, get ready. And she's like, what? Right. And two things happen to her. Her vision closes, right? And everything speeds up. Was the opposite what you want as an athlete. You want everything to slow down and your vision to open up, right? So there's obviously a lot going on in Kelly at that point, right? And she goes out the last 15 minutes of the game and plays the worst she's ever played, right? So they do the they check her for, just as the rest of the team, for performance enhancing drugs. And then everybody leaves the stadium, and she goes up to this upper tier and looks down at the stadium, and she says to herself, and this, you talking about the past reminded me of this story. She looks down and she says, Kelly, it's just soccer. You know, there's all these people here now and the stage is bigger. But remember, you've been playing this since you were 4 years old. And the most beautiful thing about that is that reminder of her past allowed her to go on, and then next 4 years later, she makes the team, plays every single minute. And then the next 4 years later, she makes the team again and plays every single minute, right? So a setback was a setup for a comeback for Kelly. But I just love the fact that she was looking back at her past and was like, you know, just because the stage is bigger and there's more pressure, I can still perform. And I love the idea of, you are only as powerful as your inner circle and your environment. That's so huge. Like Mike talked about, it's a rock, and it allows you to go and leave your rock to do great things. But I also like the idea of bringing your past with you. And I've loved hearing about your guys' stories and the major influences in your lives in your past and the present times. And I perhaps have a little harder of a question, but where do you guys see yourself 3 to 5 years from now, compared to where you are, whether that's professionally or personally, inside the PLL or otherwise?
Yeah, Mike, I keep making you go first.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's interesting because we're always, I mean, I think Dr. Logan and I both, we're always trying to like push those limits. I mean, Dr. Logan, I see that with you, and I'm inspired by you with all the like the seemingly career changes you made, and like how you're continuing to push that limit and be better. For me, I try to hang my hat on, you know, my mission, which is redefining the physical therapy profession. And I think, Dr. Logan, you and I were kind of having a conversation during the championship series about, I said, you know, is it typical that you see, you know, kids of physicians become physicians and that sort of thing, and like seeing that kind of stuff? We were just kind of having this interesting conversation, and you said to me, I feel like your children will, you know, likely see you as an entrepreneur. And I thought that was just kind of like a cool thing to hear for me, that I am a physical therapist, but I'm also just trying to push the limit and trying to affect different avenues in business or in profession, or, you know, whatever it might be. So, you know, for me, I certainly want to continue to make the Premier Lacrosse League the, you know, best medical team out there, for sure. I want to make sure that my company Evolution is continuing to push our profession forward in a way that is just going to benefit more and more people going forward. So I think if I stick to those things, and then also, you know, never say no to things. I think, you know, my partner in Connecticut, him and I always joke about writing a book that's called Just Say Yes, because there's been just so many opportunities that have been presented to us because we just say yes, and we just figure it out, and we push through it, and we work really hard, and we're able to see kind of the fruits of that labor as we go on. So those are all the things that I'm looking forward to in the next few years, and then in the future much longer after that.
My favorite quote is one of my favorite quotes is, "The future is built by those who do the work that they don't have to," and that embodies you, Mike. So thank you for that answer.
Yeah, I think, you know, Mike and I have a very similar passion for just like evolving and growing over time, and just kind of looking at, you know, the world that is in front of you, and then the world that, you know, is not in front of you, and just kind of always learning and figuring out where else can we grow, and how else can we, you know, become better, more well-rounded people. And I think specifically, you know, there's both like professional and personal growth that I want to see for myself in the next 5 years. And, you know, I think with the PLL, I really like where we're going, and we've already, you know, kind of set meeting dates for, you know, the next few weeks to think about 2021, believe it or not. So we want to continue to bring you guys the care that you deserve. And that's a very well-rounded care. That's not just from an orthopedic surgeon and a physical therapist, but all these sort of other mental health, you know, recovery type things that we've been talking about. And then, you know, at home in Denver, like professionally, like starting to really like redefine what is like an orthopedic surgeon and what's the office like. And, you know, you're talking about your uncle, and, you know, it's a very, obviously you can imagine my practice is different, you know, just by who I am. And when I was in fellowship, one of this really renowned surgeon, Robert Laprade, he deals with these really complex knee surgeries. People fly from all over the world to come see him. And, he would give the, kind of the diagnosis very straightforwardly. And then I would be in the room and, people would just start crying, and we would have a longer talk. And he said to me one day, you really got to get some, like a neck tattoo or something and like look a little tougher. So I think, the way I run my practice is obviously, different. And I hope that it's more well-rounded and it continues to be more, whether we're dealing with, having physical therapists in the office or, athletic trainers, and all those things. I want it to be more than what it is and kind of redefine that. And then, personally, like, we're raising our family and we want, the most important thing is like, I always think about is, how are these boys going to be when they're men? And, there's certain people you look at like yourself, in the league. And I'll say to Mike all the time, like, just like, these are examples that, are important for the boys to see and, to understand, like, how did that person kind of get there, from childhood to adulthood, what did they do to become such, pleasant, respectful, but also competitive and hardworking type people, because that's, it's a really great thing. You are, you personally have a life of service. You are giving back to a lot of people by the work that you do, but you're also, doing things that, have your own personal growth. And I think those are all the things we want for our children. So I think, my husband and I are always thinking about those things and what should we be exposing them to and what should we be doing on a daily basis to make sure that they are turning in those types of men.
I love it. It's such and whether you get the neck tattoo or not, I absolutely
what would
love
it say? Oh, we could have a whole poll question behind us.
Yeah.
What should Dr. Logan's neck tattoo say?
I think the kids get it. Like being smart is cool, being kind is cool, and then you talking about being more well-rounded. That's cool.
Yeah.
The way I always end these things is I always ask, how would you guys define greatness? And I think we've already dancing on the dance floor already, but I have to ask each of you, how would you guys define greatness based on what you guys have come across?
I'll take it again, just to be consistent with which I think kind of goes with my comment, which is just the consistency of pushing yourself and others around you forward.
Yeah, I think it's really like the capacity for like change. If you look at how much has changed in our world, and how much more we're all being exposed to socially, culturally, emotionally over the last few years, like that ability to sort of be open to realizing like maybe you were wrong on something in the past and to grow for it is like the true definition for me.
I love it. I absolutely love it. You guys have been absolute guiding lights for me. The last 2 years of knowing you guys has just been awesome. Obviously, you've helped me out from an athletic standpoint, but it's also been cool becoming friends with you guys. So could you let listeners know where they can follow you, learn more about you?
Sure. Mine's Mike Giunta PT is my Instagram. My company is Evolution Physical Therapy, so evolutionphysicaltherapy.com. And my company's Instagram is at Evolution PT Fit.
And then for me, I'm really just on Instagram. I stay off Twitter because I find it angry. So I'm just C Logan, Logan, MD I guess. Yeah, no. And the website is cloganmd.com or just the handle is cloganmd. That's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. You guys are such special people, especially to me.
Thank you for having us. It's really nice to see you.
Yes.
It's only been a couple days, but we miss you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thanks guys.
Okay. Take care.
Take care. Bye.